Hello YouTube, Herpster up here, and we got some kind of radiation hazards as the story today. Now, I know that I've sworn to myself that I will always run radiation hazards in public missions, but I don't know if I can bring myself to do a completely randomized loadout as a something I'm punishing my fellow players with. Alright, what did I end up with here? I see a Limbo, which I wish I had the Limbo Prime, but we'll see about that in a little bit here. I've been working on getting some other weaponry. As you were seeing there, I've been leveling up my Tiburon Prime and stuff like that right now. But for the time being, looks like I'm perfectly happy with running with the base Limbo. He certainly is a Warframe with such a polarizing playstyle that he doesn't need to win every particular stat check to be able to still function nicely. So what I've got here is my normal Limbo build, which I've set up for lots and lots of range, just because I like having large cataclysms. Now, go ahead, make fun of me for that, but I do enjoy being able to lock down an entire large room of enemies and keep them from being able to even get close to me. That's just my personal preference, and in terms of solo play, that makes this a pretty good build. So what I'm running here is Streamline for 130% efficiency. I find that usually is pretty good on Limbo, because of the passive energy regeneration from the Void Blade. He usually doesn't need to be stacking huge amounts of energy efficiency to be able to function. This build is perfectly fine with just Streamline and then Prime Flow, Quick Thinking as the defensive mods, and the extra energy capacity from Prime Flow makes up for not having hugely high efficiency there. Now, the other things that we got going here are Prime Continuity and Constitution, just for some generic power durations, because all of Limbo's abilities have duration scaling, so we want to make sure that Cataclysm and that Stasis, in particular Stasis, lasts as long as possible. And then, like I said, Overextended for lots and lots of ability range to make sure that I can have the Cataclysm hit lots of enemies, and to make sure that when I Rift Surge, the Surge hits as many enemies as possible, so I can bind as many units in place as I can. And then a couple of mods here that are of my own particular liking. I've got Pain Threshold, because Limbo does tend to take pretty hefty hits to his survivability when he is getting shot. He is a pretty darn squishy Warframe, and when his crowd control runs out or when something goes horribly wrong, like say nullifiers, Limbo does start to get stagger locked with Quick Thinking pretty fast. So Pain Threshold does apply to recovering from the Quick Thinking staggers. That's what I'm using there. If you don't want that, you could just as easily slap something like a Cunning Drift into Exilus, or you could change out your duration mod and go for a Handspring there, you know. One of the things that you might consider on this build would just be Narrow-Minded, just because Overextended already should be able to negate any range downside from the Narrow-Minded. Anyways, beyond Pain Threshold, we're also running Natural Talent, specifically because being able to get Limbo's Cataclysm up with a much faster cast animation can be life-saving for both Limbo and his entire squad. An example that comes to mind is that I do tend to run Limbo a lot when I'm fighting Kayla the Thame, just for the sake of being able to not only banish all the rollerballs that are in her arena, but also to be able to lock in our squad out and be able to take damage at all from the orbital bombardments. And the Natural Talent makes the Cataclysm so much faster to cast in scenarios like that. Finally, I'm running Cataclysm Continuum. Now, obviously, you can go with any of Limbo's 3 augments. They're all pretty good. Arguably, Rift Torrent would be the best particular augment for this build, but I find that with the reduced power strength that I'm running with Overextended here, Rift Torrent tends to be a little bit underwhelming, and so I'm running Cataclysm Continuum instead, just to keep the Cataclysm up for longer. Now, I think this is my Rift Torrent build here, where I'm actually using Transient Fortitude and some odd rank of Power Drift to increase my power strength up, and go with just Transient Fortitude Stretch instead of the Overextended build. This build is comparatively similar to the other one I was just showing you, but it's going to let Rift Torrent actually feed Limbo a lot of extra weapon damage. And then there's this build I've got going here, which is what you'll see people run a lot more often when they're trying to be polite to other people in their squad and not lock out the whole room with a Cataclysm. So what we got here is Narrow-Minded and Constitution and Continuity for as much power duration as possible, and no range mods to make sure that the Cataclysm is small, that it just takes up a small area of the room. You use it to protect an objective, and that's all you do with it. And then, of course, the other stuff going on here. So if you are the kind of person that tends to think that Limbo is an act of detriment to a squad rather than an act of benefit by banishing lots of enemies, then you would probably run your Limbo something like this. But in my opinion, a good Limbo player can make the mission incredibly easy for his other squad mates, and he doesn't have to necessarily limit his own powers. Now, what else have we got here? We got the Flux Rifle, the Zylok, and the Lesion. Now, the Flux Rifle is a weapon that I personally enjoy a lot, and I feel like the buff to the Flux Rifle, where they swapped it over to having essentially no ammo pool, was pretty interesting. I don't know that it's necessarily one of the top weapons in the game right now, but it's certainly a lot of fun to use and does a great job of shredding through armored targets and whatnot very quickly. You'll see this kill Grenier and Corpus in very fast fashion. So what I've got here are split chamber serration to start with, multi-shot base damage, always good on any rifle. Then I've got the 4 dual stat mods set up in the generic slash configuration. So we've got viral here off Toxin Cold, and we got radiation here off the other 2 elements. Also some more slash damage, because the base build that we're going for here on the Flux Rifle is that we want to take its highest fire rate, highest status chance per tick, and use that to stack slash procs as rapidly as possible, since the weapon deals almost entirely slash damage. And finally, the last slot I've got here is Combustion Beam, just to clear lower level enemies a bit faster. Now for a high level mission, you might want to swap that out into just something like, say, more multi-shot for more base damage. I'm going to leave it like that for the time being, though. And now the other thing I was thinking, right, is that Combustion Beam would be the kind of mod that you would swap out if you had a Riven mod for this weapon. Now, it used to be that you would perhaps even consider taking something like Fire Rate, say, Vital Acceleration, throw that into that kind of slot. But anymore, with the way that this weapon works, where you have to wait for the ammo to passively regenerate, I find that just going for raw damage per tick is a little bit more effective. As for the Zylok, this is the new, I mean, you can actually see it here. This is the new Siberis. Wow, Limbo holds that in a very odd position. It's a new Siberis-themed pistol. As you can see by my utter lack of cosmetics on this, I did not particularly care for this weapon when it was released as the a reward for participating in the Stride of Relay Reconstruction. As you can see, it's got an utterly abysmal amount of critical statistics, so I'm not a huge fan. It does have a high status chance and a reasonable slash percentage, so that's what the build I've got thrown on here is just the generic damage, multi-shot, more multi-shot and fire rate, and then some viral and a bit of extra heat damage, because that was the only thing I could really fit in that slot, other than, say, extra multi-shot. I'm not sure which of these would be more beneficial here. I'm just going with the extra status chance off of the dual stat mod, because I feel like that's a bit more useful. I'm going to try to avoid depending on that Zylok, though, because it's not, out of all of the pistol type weapons in the game, wow, I'm not getting, that's interesting that it's actually not showing me pictures there. I've had that glitch come up occasionally when my connection is having issues, where it's just not giving me images for any of the things I'm using. But anyways, yeah, out of all the pistols that are out there, the fact that the Zylok is highly accurate but doesn't necessarily have much crit stance means that I don't feel like, I feel like it's competing with weapons like, say, the Vacor Merlock for being highest status pistols and things like that, but nothing that's going to really be super meta anytime soon. Anyways, here's the Lesion. The Lesion, as you might know, has a passive on it where when it deals a status proc to an enemy, it gains bonus toxin damage and bonus attack speed. I've actually been phasing out my life strike off of my builds for the past patch, just because after this, we're on the mainline patch right before Fortuna gets released, hopefully in the next couple of weeks, soon to him. But but the thing is that this particular patch, there's been, I don't know if it's a bug or I don't know if it's a deliberate change that's been made where channeling can no longer be activated while you're holding down any movement key. At least, I don't know if that's just if that's just a bug with my particular computer or if that's actually happening for everyone right now, but it's certainly making it very difficult for me to deliberately pull out Life Strike and use it efficiently to regain health in the middle of combat. So I've been trying to just phase it out of my builds, which is why you see this unleveled drifting contact here. Anyways, I feel like there's 2 good builds for the Lesion, right? Because the weapon is able to gain such a huge amount of status chance and just be able to apply so many different kinds of status, you're obviously going to go for Condition Overload, right? The critical stats on this are terrible, but the base damage is huge on the polearms, the attack range is huge, which is why I want to amp that up with Prime Reach, and the status chance on the Lesion is amazing, plus the weapon already deals heavy slash damage. So we're going to go Condition Overload, Pressure point for more base damage because we want to amp up the amount of raw base damage to make sure there's as many slash procs as possible, or rather that the slash procs deal as much damage as possible. See, there's a good point, right? Is that if you put on bonus slash damage onto a weapon, it will increase the percentage of that weapon's damage as slash, and thereby the percentage of status procs that it deals that are slash procs. But the actual damage per slash proc only depends on the weapon's base damage, not on the raw number of slash that you see here. So you want to definitely consider going for a maxed out pressure point or something like that on weapons that are going to be going for conditional overload with slash. And then we've got Prime Reach, like I said, more range, polearms have huge range, that's great. Prime Fury for even more attack speed, that's going to stack with the bonus attack speed buff from the Legion's innate passive, and that's going to give the weapon just an insane amount of attack speed. You'll see that when I use that in the games coming up here, I hope. And then we got Virulent Scourge, Vicious Frost, because viral damage, again, stacks with slash very well. Finally, I only had 2 capacity left over after altering this build and taking off the life strike, so I'm going with Drifting Contact here, just unranked. A bit of extra combo duration never hurts on weapons. Obviously, if I wanted to, I could slap in an extra Forma here and go for more status chance. I could grab very easily something like Volcanic Edge and slap that in here for another status type to stack up more condition overload damage, or you could just go for a max out Drifting Contact. I simply haven't put an extra Forma onto this weapon just because my personal opinion of the Lesion is that it's a little... First of all, it's a little strong for my taste just because of the high attack speed. I tend to like some of the less meta slightly less meta polearms a bit better thing. But you know, the other thing about it is also that the Lesion I found because it forces the weapons to deal toxin damage. I don't feel like you actually would want to go with heat damage. You would want to go for bonus combo duration there because the extra toxin damage is pretty intense, and it also does tend to take up a lot of the status procs that this weapon puts out, which makes it somewhat less effective at putting out slash. It's a giant pile of baloney that I'm pulling out there because obviously the Lesion is one of the most powerful melee weapons in the game, and I highly recommend it, but still. Now here's my secondary build. This is designed around Weeping Wounds and maxed out Drifting Contact to make sure that the weapon's status chance increases as much as possible. Now this build you would obviously want to run with Naramon so you can keep the combo duration and the combo going as long as possible. And here we don't necessarily want to be running the slash mod there because we want to make sure that the weapon still is able to get those viral procs out, so that any slash procs it does put out are going to be ticking for more, and because we want to make sure that condition overload is stacking nicely. You know, there's obviously multiple ways you could be building around Weeping Wounds, because Weeping Wounds will put the weapon to 100% status chance very, very quickly, and you're not going to worry about that. Now, actually, the more I think about this build, the more I think I want to go back on what I just said, because the weapon doesn't necessarily need all this bonus status chance from these mods, since Weeping Wounds will by far max out the status chance very, very quickly. So I actually think that the better way to build this would be to go with something like what's the name of it? Buzzkill? No, it's yeah, it is Buzzkill. You want to go and put that Buzzkill back on in one of these slots, and you want to go ahead and have the other mod be an elemental mod. But if you want to really go all out on min-maxing the build, you go with something like a Prime Fever Strike here, right? So that when the weapon is dealing as much raw base damage as possible, and when the status chance is fully maxed out, you're dealing toxins up. You're dealing toxin procs, you're dealing slash procs, and you're going to get condition overload on every single hit. But I haven't taken like I said, I haven't taken the time to go for that because I do feel like the weapon is just not necessarily my personal cup of tea. Kind of like Death Cube. Death Cube is definitely not my personal cup of tea as far as Sentinels are concerned. I still haven't quite gotten to the Samaris's new Sentinel mod, so I haven't gotten a hold of the Death Cube thing. I'm going to go for the Shades augment first. But anyways, pretty generic build here. Sacrifice, Animal Instinct, Vacuum, and Meta-Ray are the important Sentinel mods that I always try to take on every one of my builds. And then generic Death Cube, Vaporize, Enhanced Vitality and Regen for Tank, Guardian. Normal stuff. The only thing I need to make sure I do here is I want to make sure that I grab Xenieric, because Limbo really does not... That level of detail looks like it's really low too. I'm wondering if I'm having issues with my connection here, because it's loading levels of detail very slowly from my cosmetics, and it's not showing those weapon indicators very well, and I am a bit worried about that. So we'll see if this mission does load up nicely. Anyways, what was I saying? That Limbo really doesn't benefit from any other focus duels other than Zylok in your normal missions. Obviously, you could play him with Naramon just to be stacking melee counters, or you could be playing with Vazaran to be reviving allies if you wanted. But in this case, I don't think we really care about either of those things, because I'm going to be treating the Flux Rifle as my primary here and not really relying on the Lesion, unless unless the Flux Rifle is out of ammo and is currently regenerating and I absolutely have to kill something. Oh yeah, I am worried about this. I am very, very worried about this, because that is looking like it's not going to load me into the mission. Crud. Crud, 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 crud. Alright. Well, I'm going to go ahead and cut off the recording here, and I'm going to reload the game and immediately log back into this mission, because normally that fixes this glitch. So I'll talk to you guys in a moment. There we go. Loading right back into the exact same mission after restarting the game. Everything's fixed, I think, so we should be able to get this mission started now.
Mobile defense mission. You must deliver payloads and defend a number of
I
locations
don't
before
know.
into the network.
It's always difficult to know exactly what to do with
prepared for
Limbo
heavy
right at the very
resistance.
start of the mission. Whether you're going to be getting energy
without
faster
you.
just by going for orbs, whether you're going to be getting
Hunters
energy
on
faster
now.
just by sitting in the
synthesis
rift plane.
scanner is
And I
detecting a potential target.
might have been able to get a finisher kill there, but it's okay, because that super fast attack speed does manage to stagger lock him. That's one of the nice things about polearms. They're absolutely fantastic for making sure enemies are stagger locked. Also worth noting, Limbo is a particularly lucky pick here, since this is a mobile defense mission. I also do very frequently play Limbo in radiation sorties, just because of the fact that in the rift plane you're immune to the radiation AoEs. But this is actually going to be very nice too, just because. Let me hold that thought for a moment while I get my Cataclysm set up here. Surge the enemies, drop the Cataclysm, hack in. Cataclysm again, search the enemies again. There we go. There's your generic Limbo combo. The Surge prevents the enemies from coming back out of the rift plane the first time you drop it, and then that gives you time to enter the systems and recast the Cataclysm, so that enemies aren't able to breathe. Now I'm just gonna have to make sure that I'm pulling stasis up. There we go. Oh, it's also nice that so many of these weapons are slash weapons, just because all I really have to do is apply some slash and then keep the enemies in stasis, and they will eventually die. What was I saying a moment ago? I forget. Had a train of thought there, I lost it.
Still working on it. Defend.
Yeah, let's go ahead and recast that. Stasis, surge, perfect. Yeah, oh, I remember what I was saying. It was just that Limbo is usually a really good Warframe for things like mobile defense missions, just because he's able to actually Cataclysm the point. And here again, this is another one of those cases where I do feel like in specifically this mission type, going for the large Cataclysm is a great option. There aren't going to be any nullifiers or anything when there's near as the enemies, and since it's a radiation sortie, having the large Cataclysm just makes your teammates that much less likely to accidentally kill one another. Let's just cast a couple surges, drop the Cataclysm, make sure all his enemies stay in, get moving. You may have noticed there, by the way, that there's a very minor bit of subtlety. Oh, this is Zylok. I do not like this weapon at all. Only interesting thing about it is the duplex auto trigger. That is at least interesting. That's one of the few weapons that functions like the Tigris in that manner. Anyways, yeah, what I was saying there that you might have noticed about Limbo is that in mobile defense missions, you cannot put the data mass into the terminal because you can't interact with this object's contact section for some reason. But while in a Cataclysm, you can still, for whatever reason, pick up the data mass, but you can't put it in. That's a very odd bit of inconsistency from digital extremes, that while in a Cataclysm you can pick up a data mass, but you can't pick up a data mass while in the Rift and outside a Cataclysm, and in neither case can you get into the terminal. It's just a bit odd in my opinion. I've heard some justifications for that particular bit of contact actions. Oh my god, look at those slashes. Look at that slash still going from those enemies that are still caught in stasis halfway across the map. That's beautiful. I've heard some justification for those options from DE employees on forums and things, and I still don't think it's very logical. There's that surge. Let's keep on surging the enemies. Little trick you can do here, of course, is once an enemy is surged and in the rift, you can re-banish them just to cause the surge to spread to other enemies.
Continue to defend.
And of course, all these frozen enemies we can just murder with the Flux Rifle from in here, easily enough. I am losing frame rate very badly right now. What is going on? Oh god! I did not notice that was about to expire, so I got distracted by the frame drops there for some reason. Alright, hang on a second. I'm going to probably lose a second of footage here because I'm alt-tabbing out, because usually that fixes frame drops. But in this case, I don't think it has anything to do with that. I just think there are too many enemies on the screen right now. Let me kill a few of those suckers to see if that helps.
Keep moving.
Oh yeah, that's helping a lot already. I can feel it. I think I just gained 10 frames per second, if not 15, off of murdering all those enemies. Surge, surge, drop Cataclysm. Jump back into the rift. Got kind of lucky there that I didn't take enough fire to send me onto quick thinking when those enemies were shooting me there. It could have been fatal or nearly so. Luckily, this is a really nice modifier for going to solo. You know, like I said, I almost always... Hello. Let's go ahead and scan this fellow.
There it is, right for synthesis. Tame this creature so you may perform the synthesis I require.
Unfortunately, you really cannot scan from the rift, which is a bit awkward, which is why I'm having to stand there and eat the toxin. Also worth noting, for those of you who don't know, if you swap off of a synthesis scanner, it drops the data mass. Why? I don't know. You can switch to a synthesis scanner without dropping the data mass, but you can't switch from it. I don't know why that is. It's just odd.
Location reached. Drop me in and defend our position.
Perfect. And I don't even know that we have any enemies here. Yeah, see, here again, I'm getting 100 frames per second all of a sudden.
This will take a moment.
And without the, where did that get placed? That's a very oddly centered cataclysm. I'm not sure why it was right there. It must have hit some kind of geometry down underneath here, I guess, because it was definitely in an odd location. Too much tapping the reload button on this thing. I haven't used the Flux Rifle that hugely much since it got reworked. So I haven't gotten a huge amount of practice with the new reload mechanics. One thing I will say that this is great for is the Plains of Eidolon. The fact that you don't have to rely on picking up ammunition ever. Ow. At recasting stasis though. I'm super happy that you can now actually use stasis. I'm gonna have to recast this Cataclysm. Alright. There's that's what the natural talent is for too, is to make sure that you just take so much less damage under hairy situations like that. Anyways though, I'm super happy about the changes to stasis where you can now be using stasis and still firing ranged weapons. Especially because Limbo doesn't necessarily want to be close enough to enemies to have to use melee weapons on them all the time. So there's no problem with it, but especially when they're under stasis and whatnot. But still, being able to use the ranged weapons makes it so much nicer. It's just, you know, having to recast it twice off it is always a bit awkward. Also, I apparently can't tell the range of my own Cataclysm. Alright, that's Limbo. He makes everything pretty easy peasy. Just stand here, taunting these enemies. Nothing they can do about it. That's just the way the rift works. It's fair and balanced. Alrighty, folks. Well, that was a pretty easy Randomizer Monday, if I have to say so myself. Got a little Warframe that was perfectly suited to the mission and got some weapons that were easily able to kill over there. Anyways, thanks for watching. Sorry about the mild glitches there, and I hope you have a great Monday. Herp to Dirt Pals.